Ask what a whale shark eats and you will be told plankton. That answer has been in the textbooks for a century, and it is not wrong. But in 2022, a team of biologists took tissue samples from the sharks themselves, ran the chemistry, and found something nobody had counted on. Seaweed. Not swallowed by accident, digested, absorbed, and turned into whale shark. Start with the animal. The whale shark is the largest fish on Earth, and it is not close. The biggest reliably recorded individual measured just over 60 feet, longer than a semi-trailer, and the heaviest confirmed weight came in near 47,000 pounds, roughly 4 adult elephants. It is not a whale, it is a shark, the only living member of its family, and every one of them carries a pattern of pale spots and stripes across a gray back that works like a fingerprint. No two are the same, which is how researchers track individuals across oceans without tagging them. And despite all of that mass, it is one of the least dangerous large animals in the sea. It cannot bite you in any meaningful sense. Its entire biology is arranged around catching things that are smaller than a grain of rice. The species is listed as endangered, and in Indonesian waters it has carried full legal protection since 2013. The mouth is about 5 feet across, and it sits at the very front of the head rather than underneath it, which is unusual for a shark, and the first clue that this animal does something different for a living. Behind that mouth are 20 filtering pads that seal off the throat completely. Each pad carries a fine mesh with openings averaging around 1.2 millimeters, near enough to the thickness of a coin. Anything larger than 2 or 3 millimeters cannot pass. Practically nothing but water gets through. There are 2 ways it uses this. The first is ram filtration, which is what you picture. The shark swims forward with its mouth open, water and food are pushed in, and it moves slowly while doing it. A little over 1 meter per second, with most of the open mouth held just under the surface. The second is stranger and far less known. The whale shark can stop swimming entirely, hang almost vertically in the water with its head near the surface, and actively suck. It pumps its body, draws water in, closes its mouth, and forces the water out through the gills. Very few filter feeders can do this. The basking shark cannot. It has to keep swimming to keep eating. Now the part that is genuinely elegant, and it is the reason this animal can do something a basking shark cannot. On most filters, the water goes through the mesh and the food gets stuck on the surface. Do that for long enough and the filter blocks. Whale sharks separate their food a different way. The water travels almost parallel to the pad's surface rather than perpendicular through it, sliding across the mesh and out through the gills, while the denser food particles keep traveling backwards toward the throat. It is called cross-flow filtration, and the effect is that very little food ever touches the filter at all. The mesh barely fouls. For comparison, a bowhead whale has to stop and clear its baleen roughly every 2.5 minutes. A whale shark clears its pads by coughing, which is exactly what it sounds like. A hard back flush of water and debris out of the mouth. And it only needs to do it every few minutes at most. All of that machinery processes something in the region of 45 pounds of plankton in a day. One more detail, because it is the kind of thing that stays with you. A whale shark has around 300 rows of teeth, thousands of them, each one a few millimeters long. They play no part in feeding whatsoever. Nobody is entirely certain what they are for. So, with that machine established, the standard answer to what goes into it has always been the same list. Zooplankton, krill, copepods, fish eggs, especially the spawn of tuna and mackerel, which whale sharks travel enormous distances to intercept. Small schooling fish, sardines, and anchovies. Occasionally, small squid. None of that is wrong. All of it has been directly observed, filmed, and measured for decades. But there was always a loose thread. Every so often, a whale shark would strand on a beach, and when researchers opened the stomach, they would find algae in there. Sometimes a lot of it. And every time, the same explanation got written down. Accidental. The animal swims through the ocean with a 5-foot mouth hanging open. Of course, it picks up seaweed on the way. Nobody thought it meant anything. That assumption sat unexamined for a very long time. At Ningaloo Reef, off the coast of Western Australia, whale sharks gather every year. It is one of the most reliable places on Earth to find them, and a team of researchers decided to stop guessing from stomach contents and go a level deeper. They took small biopsy samples from living sharks. Then they collected samples of every plausible food source on that reef, from the smallest plankton up to large seaweed. And then they compared the amino acids and the fatty acids in the food against the amino acids and fatty acids in the sharks. The logic is simple, and it is very hard to argue with. What is in the animal came from what the animal absorbed, not what passed through it, what it built itself out of. The whale shark tissue was rich in a compound called arachidonic acid. That compound is abundant in Sargassum, a brown seaweed that grows on the reef, breaks loose and floats at the surface in mats. And crucially, a whale shark cannot manufacture arachidonic acid on its own. There is only one way for it to end up in the tissue. The animal ate the seaweed, and then it digested it. And this was not one team getting one odd result at one reef. An independent group working off the coast of Japan had already found plant-derived nutrients in whale shark skin, using different animals in a different ocean. Two separate lines of evidence arriving at the same place. That is usually the point at which a stray finding stops being a curiosity and starts being a fact. The team also worked out where whale sharks sit in the food chain, and this is the number that reframes everything. A trophic level of 1 is a plant. 2 is something that eats plants. 3 eats the things that eat plants, and so on upward. Whale sharks came out at an average of 2. That is the same level as krill, which are omnivores. It also means the largest fish in the ocean feeds one full level below the parasitic copepods that live attached to its own skin, which makes the whale shark the largest omnivore on the planet. The previous holder of that title was the Kodiak brown bear, which averages around 8 feet. The animal that replaced it can reach 60. And the lead researcher pointed out why this is more than a piece of trivia. On land, every one of the truly enormous animals has been a plant eater. In the sea, we always assumed the giants worked differently, feeding a step up the chain on shrimp-like animals and small fish. It turns out, the rule may not be so different after all. If you want to get very large, you eat very low. Indonesia matters more to this story than most people realize. Cenderawasih Bay in Papua holds one of the few places on Earth where whale sharks are present year-round rather than seasonally. And they have become tied to the fishing platforms there in a way that exists almost nowhere else. Almost everywhere else, seeing a whale shark is a matter of timing. You go in the right month, and you hope. In Cenderawasih, they are simply there, which has made it one of the most valuable places in the world for studying an animal that otherwise spends its life crossing open ocean where nobody can follow it. Indonesia granted the species full protection in 2013. Not partial, not seasonal, full. That protection matters because the numbers are moving in the wrong direction. The species is listed as endangered. It is slow to mature. It travels vast distances across national boundaries where the rules change at every crossing. And it spends a great deal of time near the surface, which is exactly where ships are. Vessel strikes are now understood to be a far larger cause of death than anyone had accounted for. There is something particular about a threat like that. The animal has no defense against it and no way to learn from it. So when somebody asks what a whale shark eats, plankton is a true answer and a shorter one than it needs to be. The full version is that the biggest fish in the ocean feeds at almost the bottom of the food chain, lower than the parasites riding on its back. And part of what it is built from is seaweed that scientists spent decades writing off as something it swallowed by mistake. The evidence had been sitting in stranded animals the whole time. It just did not fit the story, so it got filed as an accident. I am curious whether that last bit lands the same way for you as it did for me. How many other things are we currently filing as accidents? Put it in the comments. Every animal in this story is somebody's parent, somebody's mate, somebody's kin, even the ones we only ever meet as a shape passing under a boat. Look after the ones who are yours. From Lipinski Wildscape, where nature tells its story.